Hello everyone, today I'm going to do a little bit of an open source contribution, and since the project that I'm going to contribute to is absolutely amazing and the contribution itself will touch upon some topics of object-oriented design, I thought that it might be a great idea to share the progress with you and explain why I do what I do. So let's jump into it. The project that we're going to contribute to today is this SpeedView library for Android by GitHub user Anna Stur. So this library allows you to create these kind of gauges, absolutely amazing speedometers, or this kind of feeling gauges. I use this library myself to create my own speedometer-like gauge, and it was absolutely amazing. So the author invested a lot of effort to make sure that this library not only provides some very cool gauges out of the box, but it's also extensible. So you can use it to create your own gauges relatively easily and take advantage of what the author already took care of. So absolutely amazing work. Now there's one small issue that I encountered during my work, and I would like to contribute back to fix that issue, and that's what we're going to do right now. So let's see the source code. First of all, layout-wise, you can see that this library has basically two modules. One of them is app and another one SpeedView lib. So this app module basically contains a sample application, and SpeedView lib is the library itself. Now, if I do git status, you'll see that I already performed some kind of work here, but all this work is contained within just app module. And as you'll see in a second, I just added a new activity and new gauge view. And that's basically my gauge that I myself created. I just want you to see how easily it is to create new gauges using this library. And then I will explain you the problem and we will fix it together. Well, we'll basically contribute together in order to improve this amazing library. So jumping into the source code, that's main activity. It simply just navigates to all these tutorial activities, and I added my new activity at the very bottom. And the new activity is really simple. It just instantiates this activity new XML, and then inside this XML I have speedometer, which I set the text position to center and then speed to 50, which is basically half the gauge. And new gauge view, that's the view that I created. And as you can see, it's not very big. It's just about 150 lines of code, but actually I could make it shorter, but I just didn't bother to do that. So that's the new gauge view that I created. Now let's run this application on an emulator. And when it starts, you will see this recycler. Now, if you go into these activities, you will see all kinds of cool stuff that the author of this library performed. So basically, you can just play around with different gauges that the author already thought about. So you have this kind of speedometer, see, various types of speedometers, image speedometer, okay, like this. Absolutely cool, amazing stuff, and you can get it for free on GitHub. It's just mind-blowing what open source does. And in addition to just showing you the different types of gauges that this library contains, it also gives you the ability to play with all kinds of configurations programmatically. So, for example, work with modes. So you can do normal mode or top mode, or let's say bottom mode. This inverts this gauge, or something cool like bottom right mode. As you see, this library is extremely configurable, and the author thought about many different use cases. Let's show another one where the text, okay, you can work with ticks, for example. Okay, you can increase the number of ticks, you can increase or decrease the padding, you can rotate or not rotate the ticks. Absolutely amazing work. As I told you, if you ever need gauge in your application, this library is just no-brainer. I find it amazing. I was really impressed with the work done here. Now, what I want you to see is the position, speed text position. So this library allows you to position this text that shows you the progress at different points on your gauge. However, these points are predefined. You cannot kind of provide custom positions. You can only use the positions predefined in this library, and that's exactly the problem that I encountered. I will show you my new speedometer. So I created this speedometer using the library as the foundation, and it took me maybe 2 or 3 hours and just 150 lines of code as you saw just now. So it's absolutely amazing what you can do with this library. But the problem here is that, now let me show you. Let's say I want to position my text, the speed text, not in the center, but let's say top center, relaunch the application, actually not relaunch, but just apply changes. And now you can see that this text moved to the upper part of my gauge. Now it's all cool, but what I wanted to do is to position this text in the middle between the center and the top positions right here. And that's something that this library actually does not allow. So if we go to this gauge position enum, you will see first of all that it's enum, it's inside gauge.kt file. And it basically defines the position using x, y, width, height, padding values. And then this enum has several predefined values, and that's exactly what you can use. Now, this approach that you see here is amazing object-oriented design. That's what object-oriented design is about. The author of this library noticed that you have kind of a concept of a position. And he could write, set X, set Y, set width, set height, etc. Just, expose fields or setters, whatever. But instead, the author correctly realized that a position is a concept inside his library, and therefore he created a new class, a new abstraction. In this case, it's a data structure represented as an enum. And he said, if you want to change the position, you just need to provide all these values at once. It makes it much more readable, much shorter. And in addition, if this library would be multi-threaded, it would allow to enforce atomicity, etc. So that's what object-oriented design is about. Identify the abstractions that you need and use them instead of just, throwing getters and setters around, or properties in case of Kotlin code. So amazing work by the author, but one problem. Enum class is not extensible. I cannot create my own positions here, and therefore if I use this library as a foundation for my own gauge, I can only use these positions. But I actually wanted, I remind you, to position the speed text a little bit differently. So that's exactly the contribution that we are going to do. So my initial idea is, well, let's first of all a little bit reformat this code in order to make it more readable. So now you can see all these properties very easily. And my idea of extending the functionality of this library would be the following. I want to take this enum position and convert it to be a sealed class. And unlike enums, where each of these values can be just kind of a static singleton object, if I use sealed classes, I can basically do much more work than that. However, there is a constraint. I don't want to break existing clients. Now, breaking existing clients can come in two forms. It can be source code incompatibility and binary incompatibility. Now, I don't mind breaking binary incompatibility because I kind of assume that if developers update to the next version of this library, then they will recompile their application. And if this assumption is not justified, then I'm doing the wrong thing. But I kind of assume, because that's how you build Android applications, at least that's in my experience, how people build Android applications. So I don't mind breaking binary compatibility by changing, for example, this enum to sealed class, but I don't want to break source code compatibility. In other words, while I'm changing this enum to be sealed class, I want all the existing source code to keep working. So let's do that. Instead of enum, I want to have sealed class called position, and immediately you see everything becomes red. So why is it red? Well, because we need to turn that into sealed classes. So let's just do that. And then let's say that all of these extend from position, right? And with these values. Now, with sealed classes, we don't need all these commas, so I remove them. And now I still have a problem expecting member declaration. Well, this probably means that this should be just objects. And voila, I refactored enum to sealed class, and everything remains the same. Now you can already see that I have at least one error inside this gauge.kt file. Let's see what the error is. Okay, so here, before that, position was an enum, and now it's a sealed class. And enums can be, well, enumerated. That's why they called enums. And so this values default method for enums would just, provide you all the values inside this position enum. However, once I made the position sealed class, I have a little bit more work to do. Sealed classes don't have this kind of enumeration, but I can trick the code. Again, that wouldn't be binary compatible, but all I want to do is to preserve source code compatibility. And so I can do something like this: companion object, and then create here this method called values, which will return array of position, right? And then it will just return array of, and then it simply lists all these positions in order, because when this position class was an enum, it would return the values method of an enum would return all these fields in order. Now I need to do that myself, so I just start writing them. The first one, top left, top center, then top right. All right, I'm done. Now all these values reside inside this array, which I return from values method. And I go here and still I have some problem. So type mismatch required gauge position bottom center, but found gauge position. That's interesting. Why would it require a specific value of gauge position? Okay. So beforehand, since position was an enum, then by assigning bottom center to this speed text position field, Kotlin compiler automatically inferred the type of the speed text position as being just position. But once I converted that to be sealed class, bottom center is not a field inside position, but a standalone object. I remind you now, basically standalone type as far as Kotlin compiler is concerned. And therefore, automatically this speed text position was inferred to be bottom center, which of course isn't correct. So we want to just force it to be position. Now, speed text position of type position, and the initial value is this bottom center value, and it seems to work. Now let's try to rebuild the application and make sure that everything works just like before, because, well, it does not work like before. Values doesn't work, but values worked here. I see. The problem is that in this library, you have Java code and you have Kotlin code, which is actually amazing as well, because the author wrote this library, or at least maybe refactored this library to Kotlin. So everything inside this SpeedView lib module is in Kotlin, but the sample application is a mix of Kotlin and Java, and therefore the sample application basically covers all kinds of scenarios that the users of this library might encounter. Again, amazing job by the author. And in this case, in Java, there's a problem, because in Kotlin, this value just works out of the box, but in Java, I would probably need to write companion, because that's how you access this. Let's go to position really, because that's how you access companion objects methods from Java. However, I don't want to do that, because that again breaks source code compatibility, and therefore users of this library that use Java and upgrade to the next version will need to change that. I don't want to do that. So I will just go into this gauge class, and this function, I will do it like that, JVM static. And once I do JVM static, I know that from Java, I will be able to access this function statically, just like this, and therefore everything will work. So let's try to recompile and run the app again. Yep, built successfully. And here it is. Again, SpeedView, control, wow, a lot of options, as you can see, and all kinds of gauges that we can use. And scroll down to my own gauge, my speedometer. So it works just like before, and everything is great. By the way, notice that the value here is not static. So even though I set this speedometer to be at 50%, this pointer actually trembles around this value. And that's again something that this amazing library provides out of the box. This kind of creates this dynamicity and the feeling of a real value that, trembles around some predefined value. amazing job by the author. I didn't do that. That's something that comes out of the box with this library. However, I remind you that that wasn't my goal. My goal was to make sure that I can move this text from top or center to just, kind of a quarter position down to position it in the center of my half gauge. So how can I do that? So far, I just refactored. By the way, let's jump into Git for a moment. And here, now I have changes not just inside app module, but also inside SpeedView lib module. So let's just add these changes, right? And now I want to commit them and say refactored position enum to be a sealed class. Okay, great. So now again, I have all these changes inside app module, but I don't actually want to commit them because my custom gauge is probably not useful, will not be useful to anyone. But this additional feature that we will add right now, the ability to control the position of this text freely, will probably come in handy for future users of this library. So let's jump back to the source code. And now once I have this position as a sealed class, I still have all these values and the old clients can use them. But now, since it's a sealed class and not an enum anymore, I can add additional one. And this one will be a class as opposed to just, object. By the way, I think I can do it data class maybe as well. And it will have some constraints, some arguments, some fields, and let's just call it custom, because that's what we want. I want to position, to provide a custom position for the text inside my speedometer. And this custom will, of course, inherit from position, just like before, but it will have all these arguments as well. So let's just drop them here. And instead of internal, right, we don't need this internal here, actually. And here we want to do the X, Y, just, list all this with height. Here, auto completion helps and everything is fine, but I still have some problems. X hides members of supertype and needs override modifier. Yes, that's absolutely correct. So I need to add here that all of these override members of the supertype, but still have some error. X in position is final and cannot be overridden. X in position is final and cannot be overridden. Okay, maybe this will solve the problem. So internal open val, and then I can actually override it. But notice that I do not provide this custom data class, which I've just created, as a return inside this values array. And the reason is that, again, I want to preserve source code compatibility. And if there's any source code written by the clients of this library that builds on the fact that this array contains just the pre-existing positions like these ones, I don't want to break these clients, and therefore custom is not a part of this array for now. I'm not sure what will be the best way to do that, but again, since I want to preserve source code compatibility, I am restricted in what I can do here. Okay, now once I have this custom position, I can go into my new activity here, and instead of using top center, I can just use custom, right? And then I need to provide all these values myself. Now, I don't remember what they mean, but let's just, take the center values, or maybe top center, right? These values, maybe. Let's take them and just throw. Now, I want X, Y. So X is horizontal offset and Y is vertical offset. So 0 top means okay. So that will probably be 0.25 to close quarter of quarter. Well, I will show you now after I run the application, because that's a little bit of tricky calculation. So again, application started, go to my new speedometer, And voila, see, this is now positioned in the center of my gauge. Now, why is quarter? See, here I provided 0.25. So why 0.25? Because the actual view is full circle. So the view ends somewhere here. So here is a 0 offset on y-axis, and here at the center is 0.5. So in between 0.5 and 1 is somewhere here. So I want here 0.25. And of course I can move once I have this custom sealed class, custom data class, which extends this position sealed class. I can of course provide whatever values I want here and move this text freely around. And that's exactly what I wanted to achieve. So I think that's pretty much completes this work. Let's just commit everything, git status. And I don't want to commit anything inside my app module because all of that is not that interesting, but I actually want just commit this gauge kt. Let's make sure that that's exactly what I want to do. Yes, I changed that from internal to internal open. And then I added this data class custom, which overrides all these fields, and everything is great. That's exactly what I want to commit. So git commit and extending position sealed class with custom subtype that allows free custom positioning of the speed text. Amazing. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Now, this repository, SpeedView Android lib, was not actually cloned from the original project, git remote -v, but as you can see, it points to my own. Take Your Chance is my GitHub account, so it points to my own fork of the original project, and therefore, well, since I cannot push into the original project, I will just push into my own repository, of course, and then password. Amazing. And now let's go to GitHub. So this is the original repository, and here that's my fork. Okay, the branch is 2 commits ahead of Anaster master, which is basically master branch inside the original repository, and that's exactly the branch that I want to open pull request against. So let's just contribute and open pull request. Right, so from my own master to this base repository master, and the title will be allowing free custom, allowing positioning of speed text anywhere inside the gauge, in addition to predefined positions. And since I basically changed, I remind you that I changed, we had this enum class position and I changed it to sealed class. I think I should probably also explain myself. So changed position enum to be sealed class and added custom subtype. And this change should be source code backwards compatible, but probably won't be binary compatible. Okay, so that's just for the author compatible. That's just some explanation for the author of this library. So when he reviews my pull request, hopefully he will understand immediately what I've done here. Okay, great. Create pull request. And now I will need to just, wait for the author of this amazing library to either accept my pull request or decline it, or ask for some other clarifications or work. And actually, if they decide to decline my pull request because they are worried about binary compatibility, I already have another approach in mind, which actually will improve something else, but I don't want to go down that road in order not to break source code compatibility for the users. But if the author decides that binary compatibility is super important, I can use that alternative approach. And in that case, well, as you might guess, you will get another video of me working and contributing to this library. So that's it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And remember, in object-oriented design, the goal of object-oriented design is to identify abstractions in your business domain. And in this case, the author of this library did an amazing job of designing a library which is extendable, but also identifying correctly that position is a concept, and therefore we should use data structures to change the position of the text on this gauge, as opposed to just, set X, set Y, setters, getters, or properties. So that's an amazing job, amazing realization. I really liked this library. And if you need gauge or speedometer, that's like a no-brainer in my opinion. This is an amazing engineering job. So until next time, goodbye.